All right, YouTube, and what now has become yet another blow to the evangelicals and assorted statist bigots in this country. Texas now, the gay marriage ban that was there has been struck down. We'll go through this. Judge Orlando Garcia, based in San Antonio, he stayed the enforcement of this ruling, also pending naturally an appeal. The same is happening in Oklahoma, Virginia, Kentucky. Utah, I believe, is also in that process. That's just essentially following the letter of the law, but it's clear when these cases, either individually or collectively, get to the Supreme Court eventually, gay marriage will become federally legal. It's gotten to the point now the majority of the U.S. population supports gay marriage, firstly, and a majority in most of the states, that is, as well, other than these deeply red states. Uh, this was never an issue over are we a Christian nation or any of these other arguments, these straw man arguments that people concoct. The main point, and this is why the bans are failing, this is why states are legalizing, is simply you have equal protection under the law, and this is a state contract. We're not talking about religious marriage. Nobody's saying that churches will have to perform gay marriages. There are people who worry about that, and you point out to them the First Amendment would make that unconstitutional to begin with, and they just won't listen. They won't believe what you're saying. Nobody's going to ever do that. It will never happen. It is unconstitutional to even think that that would happen, is wrong. What is going to happen, however, at the federal level, I predict within the next couple of years, probably later on this year, I believe the Supreme Court will weigh in on it this year and it will become federally legal. The reason why that will be is marriage, as it is understood at the federal level, is a contract between individuals. It is a legally binding contract. These two people are entering into a legal agreement that gives them certain benefits and so forth. Well, the federal government's already said it's going to recognize benefits for these couples. Therefore, it is unconstitutional if the federal government is recognizing it as this sort of legally binding contract in cases where it's already legal. You can't simply say in some other state that just happens to be red, well, here it doesn't apply. Here that federal ruling doesn't equally apply to our citizens. Of course it does. The arguments being used against overturning these bans and allowing people nationwide to enter into gay marriages are no different than the arguments that were made during segregation. Here's my thing. I think people should be able to believe whatever they want to believe. If you want to think that gays are morally reprehensible, sinners, degenerate, that they're all AIDS carrying, whatever you want to term them, if you're bigoted against gay people, that's your right. You can be as bigoted as you want. It's not illegal to be homophobic any more than it's illegal to be racist or sexist or any of these other things. And it will never be illegal to be any of these things because it would be unconstitutional to rule in such a manner. However, the state, because these are bans, these are bills that have been passed by these states through various means, either through different rulings or bills that they've put forward or popular votes on ballot initiatives. These bans are being used at the government level. The government is not an individual. The government is not a private entity. It's the government. It's the representation of the people in the country at large, or in that state, or in a township, or whatever the case may be. And it does not operate on a democratic principle. It operates on the principle of representation. Direct democracy would be 51% of the population decides it doesn't like gays and decides to kill them all. Now, that would be perfectly fine in a direct democracy, which this country is not. Or 51% of the population saying gay marriage is okay and the other 49% can fuck themselves. The problem with a direct democracy is things tend to bounce back and forth on a constant basis, and there's never any stasis on what is agreed upon. The Swiss have somewhat gone past this and refined the direct democracy to the point at which it works. This country, of course, was not built on a direct democratic principle. There are townships that operate in this manner. There are some democratic principles at work. You can petition the government. You can do all of these different things. But it's not a direct democracy. That's not the way the government itself functions. It's unconstitutional, It's against the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment specifically for the government to ban gay marriage, because it is essentially, as far as the government is concerned, as far as marriages by justice of the peace and so forth are concerned, it is simply a legal contract. It is unconstitutional to prevent any two adult, and I believe in the future in polygynous arrangements as well, it is unconstitutional to prevent them from entering into that specific contract. And again, I believe that will eventually be extended to polygamy. There are probably other ways in which it can be extended down the road as people develop new, life philosophies and so forth. As far as it goes in Texas, though, the majority of people in Texas don't support gay marriage. But that doesn't mean that they as a state, they as a population of the state, get to remove the rights of a minority of individuals based on that belief, that desire to preserve, as they term it, so-called traditional marriage, which isn't even traditional marriage. By the way, actually, traditional marriage goes way back beyond Judaism and Christianity, and usually involved polygamy. And usually involved having sex with slaves and captives of war and all of these things that these people don't want to think anything about. That was traditional marriage. Even Christian traditional marriage, I've already pointed this out, was not monogamous until the Renaissance and thereafter. Until then, it was perfectly acceptable for a person of any means to have multiple wives. There's no prohibition against it in the Bible, by the way. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, thou shalt have only one wife, thou shalt have only one husband. Thy wife must be female, thy husband must be male. It never says any of these things. Jesus never says anything about it in the Gospels, and yet these people proclaim to know what this crazy God of theirs believes. But if you want to be homophobic, that's perfectly fine. The lawmakers can be homophobic. There's nothing wrong with the governor or the legislature or whatever coming out and verbally condemning gay marriage. They have the right to free speech like anybody else does, but they can't pass a bill to strip rights from that minority of citizens. That would be like a group, let's say all the gay individuals in the United States moved to one state and then tried to pass a bill saying that straight marriage was outlawed. It wouldn't hold up. It'd be unconstitutional for the same reason. Even though they would be the majority of the population in that state, it would still be unconstitutional. It violates the 14th Amendment. It violates equal protection, which is given under the law to all citizens. So it doesn't matter what your moral murmurings are on the subject, it's still unconstitutional. The Constitution, not the Bible, by the way, is the highest law of the land in the United States. If you don't like that fact, if you want a country that legislates based on a theocratic biblical principle, there are African nations that are essentially 100% staffed and led by Christians, where they do kill gay people, where they do stone witches and adulterous wives and so forth. And you can move to these countries if you want. I think you'll find they're a little bit more backwards than things are here. People are worried about, oh, well, now AIDS will... by the way, gay sex is already legal, so I don't see how this is going to affect AIDS any. Divorce rates will skyrocket. Well, divorce rates are already above 50% for most categories of people, so that's... the sanctity of marriage sort of goes out the window on this issue. They think, oh, well, God's going to punish our nation. Now, if God wants to punish the nation, God, I don't believe in your God. If your God exists and isn't just some sort of half-baked Jewish myth, then this God can find other reasons to punish people in this country. It seems like so far the United States has done pretty well compared to even much more Christian nations in Africa and parts of it. Look at the Philippines or so forth, where people still live largely in poverty. And these are countries where they follow the Bible quite literally, and they still do stone gay people and witches and disobedient children, and it happens with fair regularity, and there's actually outcry about these things. And yet the United States, generally speaking, does fairly well, despite this so-called attack on Christianity. The new thing among Christians is to say the gay lobby. The gay lobby is pushing this. I would say it's some combination of people who understand the 14th Amendment, just like the Republicans stand up for the Second Amendment. Even the evangelicals, which are lunatics, do so. The evangelical Republicans understand and protect the Second Amendment, as do I, as a libertarian. Some of us understand the whole Constitution, not just parts of it, don't use it as a wedge issue, and want to defend all of the amendments that happen to be there. I can support gay marriage and support the Second Amendment. It's not a problem for me because I like the entire Constitution. When the evangelicals essentially say the 14th Amendment is bunk, and then the Democrats on the other side are essentially saying the Second Amendment is bunk. That's why I left these parties to begin with, because neither one actually is defending the actual laws of the country. And nobody's talking about taking God off the currency and all of these other things that were implemented in the 1950s, which I find strange. But this is a start. Essentially, yes, now individuals in Texas very soon, and soon in all of the states, I believe, probably again this year, will have that equal protection. It's self-evident, it's obvious, it's completely obvious to anyone who has read the Constitution that these bans are unconstitutional. They do violate the 14th Amendment. They do violate essentially people's freedom of speech, if you really want to think about it that way, as a contract, as a literary extension, I guess, of their, speech desiring love or something. You could make an argument for it. That probably wouldn't hold up in court as well as the 14th. But the Equal Protection Clause is quite clear. People have a right to enter into this type of contract. This is not, again, a religious marriage. This is a state contract. That is all it has to mean to anyone. You do not have to go to a church to get married. You do not have to believe in a God to get married, because it is a state contract, and literally nothing more than that, unless it is being performed for a religious purpose in a religious body. And nobody in the country has ever seriously suggested that churches and temples and so forth be forced to perform gay marriages. This is just about state contracts. By the way, and this is the final nail in the coffin of these evangelical arguments, the evangelicals largely don't even consider marriages performed outside of the church to even be valid to begin with. So if you don't want to consider them valid marriages, that's fine. You don't have to refer, you can continue to refer to them as illegitimate marriages, state marriages, all you want. But for the purposes of the law, for the purposes of governance, it has to be valid. Because again, you can't discriminate against that minority segment just because you don't agree with their lifestyle. Keep it in your church. Go ahead and oppose them all you want. But that's not going to change the Constitution. The Constitution is supreme in this country, not the Bible, no matter how much you want it to be. If you don't like that, you can take the Bible and you can go in and apply it quite strictly as much as you want in any of a number of other countries. You are free to do that. You are free to immigrate to these African nations all you want. Once you get there, you will be begging to come back, however, because you'll probably get some disease and die fairly quickly, or get eaten by a lion, or slaughtered by the natives who don't like your skin color because they are as bigoted as you, only they apply it more to